The relationship between Russia and Ukraine is long and complex. It is a history marked by both cooperation and conflict. In 2014, this difficult relationship erupted into open warfare. Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula, a Ukrainian territory with a majority Russian population. At the same time, pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine launched a rebellion against the Ukrainian government. This marked the beginning of the Donbas War. The conflict in eastern Ukraine simmered for years. A series of ceasefires failed to hold. Shelling and skirmishes became a tragic part of daily life for civilians living near the front lines. The world watched with growing unease as the situation in Ukraine deteriorated. Then, in February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The invasion sent shockwaves across the globe. Russian troops poured across the border, seeking to capture major Ukrainian cities including the capital, Kyiv. The Ukrainian people, led by President Volodymyr Zelensky, mounted a fierce defense. They were determined to resist Russian aggression and protect their homeland. The conflict in Ukraine is far from over. Fighting continues with no end in sight. The international community has rallied to support Ukraine, providing military aid and imposing sanctions on Russia. However, the human cost of the war has been immense. Millions have been displaced from their homes and thousands have been killed. The war in Ukraine is a tragedy for both countries and a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. The conflict in Ukraine is not a simple two-sided war. It is a complex web of actors, each with their own motivations and goals. On one side stands Russia, a global power with a long history of military interventionism. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has framed the invasion of Ukraine as a necessary measure to protect Russian security interests and counter what he sees as NATO expansionism. On the other side is Ukraine, a fledgling democracy fighting for its survival. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has emerged as a symbol of Ukrainian resilience, rallying his people to resist Russian aggression. Ukraine is supported by a broad coalition of international partners, including the United States, the European Union, and NATO. Within Ukraine, pro-Russian separatists continue to fight for control of the Donbas region. These separatists are supported by Russia, both militarily and financially. Their presence adds another layer of complexity to the conflict. The Wagner Group, a Russian private military company, has also played a significant role in the conflict. The Wagner Group has been accused of human rights abuses and war crimes in Ukraine and other conflict zones. Its involvement further muddies the waters of the conflict. The conflict in Ukraine is a tangled web of alliances, rivalries, and competing interests. Understanding the motivations and goals of the various actors involved is essential to comprehending the complexities of the war. War, by its very nature, is a brutal and destructive force. The conflict in Ukraine is no exception. The human cost of the war has been staggering, with countless lives lost and shattered. Civilians have borne the brunt of the violence, caught in the crossfire of a conflict not of their making. The United Nations estimates that tens of thousands of civilians have been killed in the fighting. These numbers only tell part of the story. The true human cost of the war is immeasurable, extending far beyond the battlefield. Millions of Ukrainians have been displaced from their homes, forced to flee the fighting and seek refuge elsewhere. These refugees have left behind their lives, their livelihoods, and their loved ones, facing an uncertain future. The war has also had a devastating impact on Ukraine's infrastructure. Hospitals, schools, and residential areas have been bombed, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. The destruction of critical infrastructure has further exacerbated the humanitarian crisis, making it even more difficult to provide aid to those in need. The psychological toll of the war is incalculable. The trauma of living through such violence will have long-lasting effects on the Ukrainian people, particularly children. The war in Ukraine is a tragedy for all involved. The human cost of the conflict is immeasurable, and the scars of war will likely take generations to heal. Amidst the violence and destruction, the question remains: can diplomacy prevail? Negotiations between Russia and Ukraine have been sporadic and largely unsuccessful. Both sides remain entrenched in their positions, with little common ground to be found. The international community has called for a peaceful resolution to the conflict, but a lasting ceasefire seems elusive. The involvement of external actors further complicates the situation. The United States and its allies have provided military and financial support to Ukraine, while Russia has found backing from countries like China. These external alliances make it even more challenging to find a negotiated settlement. The road to peace in Ukraine is long and arduous. It will require compromise, empathy, and a shared commitment to ending the violence. Until then, the people of Ukraine continue to suffer, caught in the crossfire of a conflict not of their making.